All right, let's dive into one of the most famous and maybe one of the most misunderstood ideas in the entire Bible, that we humans are made in the image of God. Now, we usually just write that off as a metaphor, right? But what if the ancient writers meant something way more literal, something physical? Let's get into it. So let's just cut right to the chase. Here's the big question. Do we, in our physical human bodies, actually look like God? I know your first reaction is probably, no way, God's an invisible spirit. But stick with me, because the answer we're about to uncover is probably not what you're expecting. So first up, we've got to go back to the source. Because when you actually look at the ancient texts, they point to a kind of resemblance that really pushes back on a lot of our modern ideas about God and, about ourselves. So believe it or not, the short answer is yes. The texts argue that we are similar to God in our form, but, and this is absolutely crucial, we are not similar in our substance. And over the next few minutes, we're going to break down exactly what that means, what's form and what's substance. Okay, to really get this, we have to put on our linguistic detective hats for a second. This whole idea really comes down to two key Hebrew words in the book of Genesis. If we can get a handle on these, the whole thing starts to click into place. The first word is tselem. Now, for the ancient reader, this was not some floaty abstract concept. Not at all. It meant a physical thing, a statue, an idol, an icon. Like when a king would put a statue of himself in a far-off corner of his empire to say, I rule here. Genesis just takes that idea and says, we are God's living, breathing statues in his creation. And then, as if to double down, the text adds a second word, demut. This word means a likeness, a pattern, a resemblance you can actually see and recognize. So when you put them together, tselem and demut, the message is pretty clear. We are physical representatives who carry a visible, recognizable similarity to the one we represent. And what's really fascinating here is just how solid this idea was back then. It didn't matter if you were reading the original Hebrew, the popular Greek translation, or the Aramaic paraphrases. They all got it. They all translated these words to mean a physical image and a recognizable likeness. This wasn't some weird fringe idea. This was the mainstream understanding, period. Okay, so if we are these walking, talking, physical images of God, what are we supposed to be doing? What's our job description? Well, the text ties our physical form directly to two main functions, two key callings. First, we've got representation. Right after it says we're made in God's image, the text gives the command to rule over creation. We're meant to be God's vice-regents, his managers on the ground. And second, there's filiation, which is just a fancy word for sonship. Later in Genesis, it says Adam had a son, Seth, in his own likeness after his image, using the exact same two words. So the idea is also about family resemblance. Scholar John Walton really hammers this functional part. He says our appearance is like a uniform. It's not just for looks, it signifies our job. Our human form is the uniform of God's royal delegates, the ones authorized to run the place on his behalf. And then Michael Heiser zeroes in on that personal angle. It's about family status. Our likeness is a family trait, a visual marker that says we belong to God's own divine family. We're supposed to look like our Father. And this is where it all gets incredibly real and incredibly important. This isn't just dusty old theology. It becomes the absolute bedrock for human dignity. In Genesis 9, when the text forbids murder, what's the reason? Because human beings are made in the image of God. So to attack a person is to attack God's living, breathing icon. It's a direct assault on his representative. All right, now for the most dramatic evidence of all, let's look at the eyewitness accounts. What did the prophets in the Bible actually see when they got these crazy, once-in-a-lifetime visions of God sitting on his heavenly throne? So, let's start with Ezekiel. He looks up at the throne and sees a figure with the likeness and the appearance of a man, a human form. But, and here's the twist, the substance it's made of, it's not flesh and blood. It's glowing amber and raging fire. And it doesn't stop there. Then you get to Daniel's vision, and guess what? Same story. He sees a figure with a face, eyes, arms, legs, a totally human shape. But the substance? His face is like a flash of lightning. His eyes are flaming torches. His limbs glow like superheated metal. You see the pattern here? And then finally, we jump all the way to the book of Revelation. The Apostle John sees the risen Jesus, and how is he described? As one like a son of man. And again, you get the exact same pattern, a recognizable human form, but a substance made of pure, divine glory, eyes of fire, feet of glowing brass, and a face as bright as the sun. So what do we do with all this? How do we put it all together? Well, those prophetic visions actually give us the key. They show us, in the plainest terms possible, that we have to make a super clear distinction between God's form and his substance. And here it is, laid out plain and simple. The form is what we share. It's that humanoid structure, head, face, arms, legs. It's the divine pattern. But the substance, that's what is completely, totally distinct. Our bodies are made of dust, of flesh and bone. God's revealed form is made of celestial stuff, fire, light, glory. That's the divine essence. Okay, let's bring all these threads together now. Let's talk about the absolutely profound implications of what it means for you and me to be God's living, walking, breathing icons right here on planet Earth. So, what does this all really mean? Well, first off, it gives us a really powerful answer to why you shouldn't make idols. Why would you carve a statue of God out of wood or stone when he has already filled his temple, the world, with billions of living authorized icons, us? Second, it kind of flips our whole reality on its head. It suggests that God's heavenly glorious form is the original, and our physical bodies are the earthly copies, the reflections of that ultimate pattern. And finally, of course, it all culminates in Jesus, who's called the perfect image of the invisible God, the one person who perfectly brought together that divine substance and human form. So I'm not going to end with a statement. I'm going to leave you with a question to chew on. If this ancient way of seeing things is true, that every single person you meet and the person you see in the mirror every morning is a living, breathing icon bearing the physical form of God, how does that change the way we see ourselves? And maybe more importantly, how we see and treat everyone else around us?